right, cool. So, welcome and everybody that's tuning in today. We have David Patton, who's an attorney at law in the state of Ohio, been doing cannabis work for a long time, has done some work with the school in the past, and we wanted to get him on today to kind of share his story and his progression through really helping not just the cannabis community, but lawmakers, everything through the process of us finally becoming legal in the state of Ohio. So I wanted to give him a chance to kind of tell his story and share some of the work that he's been doing. Great work throughout the state of Ohio. So welcome, David Patton. And I think to get started, let's get you maybe your website and a rundown, a summary of what your law firm does.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you, Austin. My website is lawpatton.com, LAWPATTON.com. Let's see, what does my law firm do? Since 2016, my law practice has been devoted to the cannabis and hemp industries. Well, first the cannabis industry, then later the hemp industry in Ohio. Wow, I've done lots of things. Initially, it was a lot of license application work. When Ohio passed its medical marijuana law, and then they took some time for them to come up with rules and regulations, and then once that was all done, it was time to apply for licenses. And in Ohio, most licenses are capped at a certain number. Everyone except testing laboratories. So you having a limited number of licenses, and you had a lot of people who wanted licenses. And so early on, a lot of my work was working on licensure applications, which, this is not like applying for a driver's license or a fishing license. These license applications were, they were completely insane. So then the state graded the applications, and then my work sort of shifted into representing people, applicants who had their licenses denied. I was able to get a couple clients licensed. So okay. For those lucky few, nice. My work shifted to more of a transactional corporate law type of thing. That's where things are right now. The licensure denial cases are now, last time I heard, there was one case left, and that was about a year and a half ago. So I think all the license denial cases from the first round of licensure are over and done with. Okay. So now it's just, helping clients who have licenses, help them to maintain their license. Because, this is what I tell my students all the time. It is a heavily regulated business. Yeah. So absolutely. It's just a constant challenge to stay within regulatory compliance. So there's that, but then now that Ohio has passed recreational cannabis, it's going to be a whole new world. It is a whole new world, but it's slowly taking shape. Gotcha.
So what I really want to do is I kind of want to backtrack all the way to the beginning. So I want to ask you, how early did you get introduced to cannabis? Not as a career, but like, when you were younger, do you remember, and I ask all the guests this question, do you remember when you first used cannabis? Like, how old were you when you first tried it?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you that story because the statute of limitations is run. Okay. I was about 15 years old. I was at Great Northern Mall in North Olmsted, Ohio, which for those who don't know, that's on the west side of Cleveland. And the friends I was hanging with, they broke out some weed, and I took a few puffs, and I was high as a kite. So yes, that was my first experience trying it.
Did it become a habit at that time, or was it kind of a one and done type of thing?
It didn't become a habit, but I found that I really enjoyed the experience, which was back in those days, it was, I was conflicted because, well, just to give you some context, okay, this was, I graduated from high school in 1987. So this would have been like around 1985-ish when I first tried cannabis. And this was back during the Reagan administration, and Nancy Reagan, the first lady, her project, her big issue was the Just Say No to Drugs campaign. And this is when DARE started to come into schools. There were all these public service announcements on television telling you that drugs are bad. It's a gateway drug. It's the devil's lettuce. It's Satan's salad and all this. So here I was being just bombarded by pop culture with all these anti-drug messages. And then when I was sitting at the food court at Great Northern Mall getting high, I was like, whoa, this didn't kill me. This is really a great experience. So yes, I very much wanted to use cannabis more, but I had a hard time finding it. So it was, it was a sourcing type of issue. Okay.
Gotcha. Well, yeah. So, I mean, that's good to know. And then when did it kind of kick back? So let's fast forward to, you graduate high school, you probably, use cannabis on a not too frequent basis because you got, problems getting your hands on it. At what point did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? So like, what were you in high school still when you said, that you wanted to practice law, or was that something that came about like towards graduation? At what point did you know you wanted to be a lawyer?
Oh, you know what? My interest in becoming a lawyer didn't really come up until I was an undergraduate. So, what helped is my brother, he graduated from law school in 1996, and he was the first member of our family to become a lawyer. And so watching my brother go through that process, it made it a possibility for me. And the more I looked into it, the more I thought, this is pretty cool. So I think it was like my junior or senior year of college where I decided to go to law school.
And what were you practicing in college at that time? And where was it?
Oh, this was at Ohio State. So just the background. So I joined the Army. I enlisted in the Army when I was 17.
Okay.
And the military back then, and I think they still do this, they have random drug tests. So, the sergeants would come to the barracks at 3:00 in the morning on some random day, and they would say, all right, everybody go down. It's time to take provide a urine sample. So they tested for, all the drugs of abuse, cannabis, cocaine, so on. So because of that, I didn't use any cannabis when I was in the military. And then when I got out, I was 22 years old. So I was a 22-year-old freshman at Ohio State.
Yeah.
I kind of aged out of the party scene a little bit.
Okay.
So, I mean, I was pretty serious about school. And then, of course, law school came later. But yeah, this was all at Ohio State University. No, I'm sorry, the Ohio State University.
Yeah, the Ohio State University. And what did you take as an undergraduate? What were you studying at that time?
I was actually a nursing major because I had been a medic in the Army.
Okay.
And then I also chose that field of study because it was marketable. I could go out and get a job with my undergraduate degree, and being on my own since I was 17, I just didn't have the luxury of majoring in something that was wasn't going to be able to get me a job after graduation. So it was a pretty radical departure, but I'm really happy with the decision that I made.
Gotcha. So then when you decided to then, pursue your law degree, were you thinking that you were going to do criminal law? Do you think, you were going to be a defense attorney? What was your, at that time, there wasn't really a cannabis industry, right? So you weren't thinking about being
Right.
a cannabis attorney. So what was your, I guess your role in law? What did you see it developing to at that time? Did you want to be a corporate attorney? Were you doing a criminal defense attorney? What did you think you wanted to do at that time?
You know what? I really didn't have a clear idea of, I thought that perhaps I would do something in the healthcare industry, like merging the healthcare industry with the legal services industry.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. The funny thing is, it seemed like, okay, so I went to law school at Ohio State too. So it seemed like our first semester as first year law students, like everyone wanted to be a prosecutor. And then after the first semester, that all went by the wayside. Like one of my friends, she was all gung ho. She was going to move back to Mahoning County and be a prosecutor. She took a tax law class and fell in love with tax law. So now she got a postdoctorate degree in tax law. And now she's a tax lawyer. Another good friend of mine, his dad was a deputy sheriff in Youngstown, and so he thought he was going to be a criminal prosecutor. Then he finished number one in the class, so all these big law firms wanted to throw money at him, and so he became a corporate lawyer instead of it. So it's I guess my point is, they say in the law you don't choose your specialty chooses you.
Got you.
So
well, that's a great segue, because getting into now how you got into cannabis law. I saw a couple of things, a story on your website, which I've known for a while since I've known you, but tell us that story. How what happened with your son and how that kind of led you into the cannabis legal space.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, like I said before, I used a little cannabis, experimented with it when I was in high school, and then once I joined the Army and went to college and law school, I wasn't using it. So I had been out of the illicit drug scene for decades. In 2013, my son, who's now almost 17, he'll be 17 next month, but back when he was 6 years old, he had a grand mal seizure out of the blue. There was no family history of epilepsy, no warning, just he had this horrible seizure. And we had to call 911, took him to the hospital. Over that first year, he had about 1 or 2 seizures a day on average. So, he had about 500 seizures. He wasn't a candidate for surgery. He wasn't, none of the medications were working. So it was treatment resistant, non-surgical. And our neurologist didn't tell us at the time, but my son's doctor thought he was going to die. Like, one day he would have a seizure that would kill him. So, we were just in a very desperate situation. My wife discovered cannabidiol. So this is back in 2014. So now you can buy CBD at the gas station. But this was back in 2014.
Yeah.
And so the only place to get CBD was with the Stanley brothers out in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And so we obtained some CBD and started giving it to our son. And his seizures spontaneously stopped. Like they just one day he just, didn't have a seizure. And then 2 days and 3 days and 4 days, and then a year and 2 years. And now it's been, I think he had his last seizure January of 2015.
And is he still using the CBD, or was it like it just like for the time that he was using it, it just got rid of his seizures? Does he still use it every day? Is it the CBD that's keeping the seizures?
No. So, the way epilepsy works is there's maybe, 7 or 8 standard medications. Okay. So what a doctor will do is they'll say, okay, here's a patient. I'm going to start with drug number 1. Okay. And if drug number 1 doesn't work, you go to drug number 2. 3, 4, 5. And that now hopefully one of those drugs will stop the seizures. In a treatment resistant case like with my son, we got through all the standard drugs and none of them were working. So now the doctors are just, now it becomes less of a science and more of an art. So they're like, okay, let's try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. CBD was in the mix. I don't know exactly what stopped it or why his seizures stopped, but they stopped. Another thing about epilepsy is, and particularly with little kids who have it, the anti-epilepsy meds will have psychotic side effects like aggression, disinhibition, cognitive side effects. So then you have to take a whole other bunch of meds to counteract the side effects. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So these kids are just walking science projects. Just lots and lots of meds, and it's a delicate balance.
So how many years were you into his medicine before you guys discovered the CBD? And then I guess from that point it was, I think you might have said it already, but how long was it then? Did it take after you were introduced to CBD for his seizures to pretty much subside?
So let's see, he was diagnosed September of 13. We got our hands on some CBD January of 15. So what is that? About a year and 4 months?
Yeah, but that seems like a long time as a parent, right? Going through your
my God, yeah.
seizures.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I think you've met my son before. You probably met him when he was 5 or 6 years old. So your story really resonates with me in that sense. Is I just couldn't imagine, watch my son go through that. So, kudos to you for staying after it and being open-minded enough. I mean, obviously you had already used cannabis, so you probably weren't opposed to it, but yeah, it's just that's just a moving story. So in 2015 you got your hands on it, and by when had his seizures subsided?
Within a week after we got it.
Wow.
But then again, I don't know if it was the CBD or if it was the other meds or a combination thereof, or whether it just stopped on its own. But yeah, and there was a video going on. I saw it on YouTube years ago. Maybe it's still there, but there's this video features a retired police officer who had really bad Parkinson's disease. Like his, just all the facial symptoms, the large muscle and bone symptoms. I mean, this guy was just wrecked with Parkinson's. And then what they do in this video is they give him a CBD infused drink. And then they show it in real time, literally within 5 minutes. You can't even tell this guy has Parkinson's. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's crazy. So and I resonate with that as well. My mom's husband actually has Parkinson's, and so we're gonna try to see if CBD works for him as well.
You know what? I'll see if I can find that video. It's pretty dramatic. I can email it to you.
Yeah, send it to me, and we might even be able to overlay it on this, interview as well. So we're in 2006, 15 into 16 now. Your son stopped having seizures. How early into that process did you decide that you were going to shift your focus from whatever you were doing in law at the time, and you were going to switch over to cannabis?
Oh, sure. Okay. So yeah, this was like 2015-ish. And then that experience with my son got me into the activist community. So I was working with groups like Normal, Ohio Patient Network. And, I started off as an activist.
Yeah.
And that continued, and that's actually how I met you guys over at the CSC. But that continued on, and then in 2016, the Ohio legislature passed a medical marijuana law, and that went into effect September of 16. And once that happened, that gave me the leeway to pivot my law practice into cannabis. Because at the time, so I mean, I literally woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be a cannabis lawyer. Now that we have this new law, I can do this. And so my second thought was, well, is there anybody else doing this right now? So I just went on Google and I typed in the search bar, medical marijuana attorney, Ohio, and I hit enter, and I got 2 hits. And it turns out both search results were criminal defense lawyers. Yeah. And I thought to myself, okay, yeah, this is going to be great. You know, the field's wide open. Yeah. So, gotcha. So yeah, so yeah, it was that being already having been an activist for like a year and a half or so, and then Ohio going legal made it so I could pivot.
So you were in that mode already at that time. You know, you're an advocate. You're moving into, serving the Ohio market, which is new to your hometown. How did the relationship with CSC come about? And pardon me if I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I was there at the time. You as far as teaching, because we probably did that same search. To be honest, we probably were looking for somebody to teach our law class, and there probably were a few attorneys at that time. And you probably popped up, but let me hear from your perspective, like how did that introduction happen?
Oh, sure. So, like I said, I was involved in the activist community, and I was invited to share my experience, tell the story of my son at an Ohio Normal meeting. Okay. But back then, Ohio had like normal subchapters. Like there was like north, south, east, west. So I think this was Ohio Normal North, whatever it was. It was some subchapter. So anyway, they invited me. They wanted to hear my story. So I went down to the office in Independence, which later became the Cleveland School of Cannabis. Yeah. And I thought I was just there for a meeting. And, for those familiar with the school, you'll know Brian Adams was there, Allie Reeves was there, Donnell Watson was there, all the usual characters. And so I didn't really know what was going on, except they always wanted me to come talk. So I did. And it looked like later Donnell and Brian wanted me to teach. So I didn't know I was going to a job interview, but that's kind of what it was.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we're glad that it panned out that way. I think I remember at that time, same thing. There wasn't a lot of attorneys in the space. I think you and Tom Herron, matter of fact, were the two that I think we reached out to originally, and we're teaching some of the first law and policy classes. So we kind of brag about that position now, 7 years later, that we were really on the ground level of Ohio, and it kind of turned out that way, in the long run, where guys like you, guys like Tom are like, you guys are leading the charge in a lot of cases. You're some of the most forward facing cannabis attorneys in the state now, and everybody kind of started on that ground level. So that's something that I just love to see, and I love to brag about, to say, hey, these, I can vouch that David Patton was on the ground level, in 2016, working towards.
Oh, thank you. Street cred.
Yeah.
And see, now we can't afford Tom Herron anymore.
All right.
I used to joke with Todd because, like in the early days, we would appear on panels like for continuing education classes, and I was always introduce Tom as the second best cannabis lawyer in Ohio, trying to imply that I was the number one. But no, he's Showtime now.
Yep. Well, you are as well. I put you in the same boat,
Thank you.
As that's concerned. So I also do want to address, we talked about, a lot of the the licensee work you're doing. I know that that's going to pick up. There's licenses becoming available again pretty soon. New license applications will be coming available, so I'm sure you have a lot of work there. But you also mentioned some pro bono work that you've been doing for folks who are medical patients who get sentenced to probation, right? So can you talk about, some of that work that you're doing and then how people may be able to reach out to you if you're in that situation where, you're a medical patient, you do something that ends up putting you on probation, and now, the state is basically saying you can't take marijuana. How are you helping those people out?
Oh, sure. So, here's the basic fact pattern. Okay, you have a medical marijuana patient. They've got a valid recommendation. They have a current and valid medical marijuana card, and then they get involved in the criminal justice system. They get charged with a crime. They get convicted. What the trial court does is they don't send the person to prison. They sentence them to probation. Mm-hmm. They also call it community control, but it's probation. And this is where, you got to see your PO periodically. There's restrictions. You're not allowed to have a gun. You're not allowed to, depending on what the conditions are, maybe you're not allowed to go into a bar. Okay. Just all these probation conditions. So medical marijuana patient, criminal conviction, probation sentence. Then we file a motion with the trial court asking the court to allow the probationer to use medical marijuana, to lawfully use medical marijuana while they're on probation. Mm-hmm. And some trial courts say yes, and some trial courts say no, and some trial courts say hell no. Oh, and I've actually been litigating cases similar to this since 2013. But over the last 2.5 years, it's really ramped up. Mm-hmm. So, going back to my activist days, some of these medical marijuana patients who are not allowed to use medical marijuana while on probation have reached out to me. And I finally won one. That's the good news. Okay. It was last December. Okay. But getting there, I got to tell you, my faith in the judicial system has been utterly shattered. By in doing this work. That some of the, I'm just going to say it. Am I allowed to work blue? No, I probably shouldn't. Some of the shenanigans. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. I was going to say fuckery. Okay. So you can leave that out. But I had one. There is a judge in Portage County, and she said from the bench, when the probationer's medical marijuana card was presented to her, she said, "I don't want a medical marijuana card. A medical marijuana card means nothing to me." And this judge also has a sign in the courtroom that reads, "Marijuana is still illegal." It's just utterly shocking that a judge would say these sorts of things and engage in that sort of behavior. It's also the prosecutor's offices. It's just a scandal the way some judges in Ohio are handling this. Yeah. And what I can't wrap my mind around is, here's a hypothetical. Okay, the state of Ohio abolished slavery in 1851, okay, in the Ohio Constitution. All right. Let's say it's 1852 and I'm an Ohio judge. Yeah. And I say, you know what? I don't care what the law says. I love slavery. So I'm going to enforce slavery. Okay. Right. Could that ever happen? Would that ever happen? Absolutely no. Right. But these judges who say, you know what? I don't recognize medical marijuana in Ohio, so I'm not going to enforce that law because it's not in alignment with my own personal policy preferences. Yeah, that's a scandal. Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm fighting. Mm-hmm. And what really got me angry, just incandescently angry, was this one client of mine out in Portage County has epilepsy.
Wow.
And there's a judge out there who says, you're not allowed to have medical marijuana because I don't like marijuana. And it's a scandal. It's a scandal. Either judges in Ohio, I think they have two choices. Either you declare the entire marijuana program unconstitutional for violating the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution, or you shut the hell up and start enforcing Ohio law.
Yeah.
There is no in between. But you know, I think the fact that this one client shares the same disease that my son has, that just
like light a fire.
To see, I was pissed. No, I wasn't pissed off. I was livid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you, taking up for people, especially that pro bono work. I know that, there's a lot of business out there for you. So for you to do that is really, commendable. And that's the reason why right there. I mean, somebody has epilepsy and what they have to go to jail or you got to choose between going to jail or having seizures is just, is out of control. So we appreciate you for doing that work for sure. Oh. And I'll encourage everybody to kind of reach out to you who may have those problems. We'll make sure to promote that. So
right. Oh, and well, thank you, Austin. And my criteria are I'm looking for somebody who's a medical marijuana patient, i.e. they've got a valid recommendation and the current and valid medical marijuana card. Sentenced to probation, that's number 2. Not jail, not prison, but probation. And number 3, it has to be a non-drug related offense.
Okay.
Those are the 3 criteria. And there's legal reasons for that.
Okay.
Like I said, we finally won one down in the 5th district.
Well, hopefully that gives you some momentum, something to lean on, with other judges.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. I want to be mindful of time. I know we went a little bit over. I do want to touch before we take off about the THCa. So we get these questions all the time, and I did my own research. I couldn't believe it myself. So I had been getting like ads on Instagram and stuff, right? Like, hey, you can buy, you can buy flour from us, and I'm like, we've gotten our ads shut down on Instagram and stuff before. So I'm like, what's going on here? So I click it. I click all the way through. THCa flour, ordered it. Got it delivered right to the house. And for those of you who may not know, THCa is almost all cannabis that's produced is THCa flower because the flower is not decarb yet. So if you ate a piece of cannabis, you wouldn't get high because the THC in it is THCa. It hasn't been decarboxylated and turned into the kind of THC Delta 9 that gets you high, right? But in the Farm Bill, it's written so that Delta 9 is the only thing that has to be less than 0.03 THC. So as long as the plant, and flower that you're producing is below 0.03 of Delta 9 THC, which is probably all or most of cannabis flower in this country, it's not violating the 2018 Farm Bill. So it seems like that's kind of the loophole that, is occurring right now. And, a lot of people on different sides of the fence of this. So really, obviously I understand licensees who pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to sell, THC legally are really upset about it. And rightfully so. But then, there's also the hemp and CBD, either producer or retailer who says, hey, this is what the Farm Bill says. And there's nothing that, prevents it in the law the way that it's written. So there's a couple things I kind of just want to address with the THCa thing is, one, what is the environment that we're playing with, I guess, on a business level? Is that kind of my summary of it, correct? And do you see Ohio moving in any specific direction on how they're going to regulate, specifically THCa products?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, just so some background for those who don't know, every 5 years or so, U.S. Congress passes a farm bill, which sets United States agricultural policy for the next, it's usually 5 years. So in 2014, the 2014 Farm Bill had a pilot program for hemp. And then Congress did another Farm Bill in 2018, and they took that hemp pilot program and they expanded it nationwide. And if you read the regulations that were promulgated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, while the plant, now this makes zero sense to a botanist or a scientist, but it makes sense to lawyers. So while the plant is in the ground, it's called cannabis, all right? And then shortly before it gets harvested, it gets tested for delta-9 THC concentration, 0.3%. If the crop tests below that 0.3% cutoff, then as a matter of law, it becomes hemp, and it will forever remain hemp. And if that crop is above the 0.3% cutoff, then that crop magically becomes marijuana. It's a Schedule 1 drug and it has to be destroyed. Okay. So let's say, the cannabis comes up, it gets tested, it's below the cutoff, now it's hemp. Elsewhere in the federal regulations, it says hemp may be sold in interstate commerce. Okay, so that means if you grow hemp in Maine, you could presumably sell it to Hawaii. Okay, you can sell it in, to the other 49 states. Excuse me. So what the industry knew or figured out really fast that the regulators didn't is that if you can get enough biomass, enough plant material, even if it's low THC concentration, you can extract lots and lots of delta-9 and THCa and CBD from these plants. And so that's why you can go to a retail establishment pretty much anywhere. Like there's one here in Cleveland called Planet of the Vapes. They have a couple locations, which I'm not, this isn't a paid endorsement. I just love their name. But you can go in there and you can buy delta-9 THC and it's perfectly legal. And so delta-8 is like that as well. So, what I think this underscores is industry is smart and government is stupid as a general rule, right? Because the people at the USDA who came up with these rules, it probably never dawned on them. It never occurred to them that, under these rules, you can comply with the law and you can make just tons of intoxicating CBD products. Well, like you pointed out, Austin, for the companies and licensees at the state level who had to go through an onerous application process and then go through onerous regulatory compliance costs and measures, they're like, hey, we're playing by the rules, but then you've got all this hemp-derived stuff coming from out of state, what about us? So I think it's a failure of government in large part. And is a couple years ago when this first started to come out, some states, I think Michigan, came up with a law saying no. A hemp-derived delta-9 or THCa product may be legal under federal law, but Michigan made it illegal.
Right.
Now, I don't know how far that's gone, if it's because I don't think Ohio has such a law, but they might.
Ohio doesn't, but they might come up with one, right? I mean, if I was a licensee, I would be lobbying to get that, to get some sort of put in place. And there are other states, I think, that have done it, but it's kind of like a total reversal, right? You have, a few years ago, it was completely federally illegal, right? And then states were legalizing it. And now you have a situation where technically it's federally legal, under this farm bill figured out. But now you have to have states retracting the access to it. So it's kind of crazy atmosphere, I think, that we're playing in right now.
Oh, absolutely. And, this is just speculation at this point, but perhaps one reason why states have not criminalized hemp-derived products under state law is you would have what they call in the law a supremacy clause problem. So there's a thing in the U.S. Constitution called the supremacy clause, which says that federal laws are supreme over state laws. So if you have a state law that's in conflict with a federal law, the general rule is the state law loses, the federal law prevails. Yeah. So if Michigan were to say, oh yeah, you can't sell that here, well then, the hemp maker could say, well, yes, we can. And I have federal law on my side, you have state law on your side, so I win.
Yeah.
Another important point, though, I think is, talking about what future regulations are going to look like. What happened in Ohio with rec is going to be a real game changer. Mm-hmm. So if you think back to medical marijuana, there were 3 agencies that were running the show. There was the Department of Commerce, the Pharmacy Board, and the Medical Board. Okay, now the Medical Board, they just regulate doctors who recommend, and then they also have the authority to change the list of qualifying conditions, which the Medical Board is still going to do that in this new world. But Pharmacy Board was regulating dispensaries, and the scuttlebutt on the State House Square was that they hated it. The Pharmacy Board never wanted to be in the cannabis business. So there's been a new division within the Ohio Department of Commerce set up called the Division of Cannabis Control. And that division is going to regulate everything else that the Medical Board is not regulating. So they're going to regulate cultivators, dispensaries, processors, and testing laboratories.
Yeah.
And part of their statutory mandate is they get to write regulations, which I just got an email or a notice just within the last week or so talking about how the Division of Cannabis Control is working on their administrative regulations, their rules and regulations, and that the proposed rules are supposed to drop pretty soon. Okay. So check those out, because that's where all the details going to be.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. Other than the commerce piece, right, of the THCa, have you seen anyone use that as a defense at all? Like somebody gets caught with cannabis, can they say, a flower? Would it be? Couldn't they say this? Do they have to test? Wouldn't law enforcement have to test the cannabis to see if it was over 0.03?
Okay, so the testing the testing occurs on the farm within a certain period of time, like within 3 days of harvest. I think it's been a while since I've read the regs, but shortly before harvest, the hemp farmers are required to take a representative sample of that crop and get it tested. And then that's where that 0.3% determination is made. And so if it's below, then it's like magic. It stops being cannabis and it becomes hemp.
Gotcha.
Or if it's above the 0.3%, it stops being cannabis and it becomes marijuana.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Does that make sense?
Because that's where the shops always have to have a certificate of analysis on hand. So, right.
Yes.
Like the product that you buy from a place, it has to be tied to a batch number that's tied to a test. So that, in a sense, is the person's defense would be, that this batch of cannabis was tested and it tested as, it's a hemp-derived product, correct?
Right. So, if you're talking about the end-use consumer, like the guy who goes to the vape shop and buys a hemp-derived product, let's say he got stopped by the cops and they searched him and they found this bag. Well, he would be able to point to the bag that says, hemp-derived 2018 farm bill, what I'm doing is legal. Okay. Now, and then that's where the inquiry should end for that person.
Yeah.
For the retailer who sold it, they would also be, it seems to be, they would be able to rely upon what was represented to them by the supplier. And the supplier would be able to show the COA. So if you got some FBI agents to, investigate this thing from start to finish, as they work backwards from the user to the cultivator, they should be able to see that everything was kosher.
Gotcha.
So there should be no criminal liability for that. Although I was at a presentation a couple years ago. This was shortly after the 2018 hemp federal farm bill was passed, which legalized hemp production in the U.S. again. And there was a truck filled with hemp, perfectly legal product. It had been tested, but the cops pulled this truck over, and the cops, they didn't know the difference between marijuana or hemp. So they impounded the truck. They arrested the guy. They were going to throw the book at him. But he got a really good defense lawyer, and he got the cop to testify under oath that he couldn't tell the difference between hemp or marijuana.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that clinched the case. So, in theory, one should be able to deal in hemp-derived products without fear of criminal liability. As a practical matter, if you have cops who don't know
the difference, the
details here, then you might, have a brush with the law.
Yeah. So we're going to try to do our part too, to try to train, I think the state should be doing a little bit more, education on this subject, right? Because there's probably a lot of litigation, on the books, or just cops just don't know. Like you said, it looks like weed, smells like weed. If I'm a cop, I say it's weed, right? But that's not always the case. So I think there's a lot.
Right. Well, imagine you're the truck driver,
right?
And you get in the truck, and you got all the paperwork that says you have a lawful cargo.
Yep.
And then a couple hours later, you're in cuffs at the police station. You'd be like, what did I do?
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that knowledge. It was great talking to you. We went,
yes, likewise.
So there was great information. I'll make sure to send everything over to you so you have it as well. And thanks for coming on, and thanks for all the great work that you've been doing for Ohio, for businesses, for individuals. We're lucky to have you, on our side in the cannabis community. So we really appreciate you and all the work you do, David.
Well, thank you. And let me just say, I could say the exact same thing about you guys over at the CSC. You guys have been pioneers in this industry. And so, thank you for all you do.
All right. Thanks a lot, David. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care, Austin. Thank you.
Go.